Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have each and every one of you here today, and I have the absolute honor of having someone that I am so intrigued to learn all the things, but also my heart goes out to you on your story. There's some similarities and things which we'll kind of touch base on today, but just the path that you have chosen and what you have done with where you were at, what you have been through, and the trajectory of your life now. I am in awe, and I'm so honored to have you on here to be able to share that story and also create a space of support for others who may be feeling the same way. So Kaja, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thank you. The pleasure is really all mine. And let's try to storytell and help, right?
Yes, absolutely. So before we get started, then I would love for you to introduce yourself and just tell everybody, who you are and a little bit of what it is that you do, and we'll kind of dive in from there.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Kaja, and I'm a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist, and right now a writer and a filmmaker. So that's something that was deep in my heart for a long time, and I just revived it. But most of all, I'm a mom of a beautiful 7-year-old, and I have the fun fact: 5 animals in a 2-bedroom space. So call me crazy.
That is fantastic. Hey, I love my animals. So if my husband had it his
Right?
way, we would have more. I love it. And you're so much more than just, and this is going to sound funny, but for anyone that's listening that knows me knows this, more than just a therapist, right? I mean, I've talked with people that are in the therapy space that are psychotherapists and stuff like that, and your ability to be able to connect and help people is on a completely different level, right? I've talked with several people, and I've spoken on this very openly on my podcast before about, when I went through the things that I went through, I had a really hard time with therapy. The few
Mhm,
people that I did have, I felt very disconnected from, and I felt like they didn't
mhm,
understand what I was going through. And so it just became like this repetitive conversation, right?
mhm.
But I know that you're very open about the things that you've been through, but I think that it also creates such an untold connection for people that are looking for that safe space. And I'll let you kind of fill in from there.
Yes. So it's just surprising that you're saying about this right now, because I just had a conversation about psychotherapists and psychologists. And I remember on my last year of university, our dean told us that to be a good clinical psychologist, because you can have many different kinds of psychology, right? Social,
Hmm.
clinical, business, sport, name it.
Yeah.
I chose clinical because I always wanted to work with people. But he said to be a good clinical psychologist, no education, no knowledge, no experience will ever replace heart and soul that seeks to connect with others. And this is so true. So I believe that, a good psychotherapist is definitely someone who can connect with you. And sometimes it is necessary to search for one for a little while. But going back to to me and to your question, I think that my experience, I mean, I'm sure that my experiences in modeling and in show business when I was very young also had a huge impact on what I chose to study and how I directed or redirected my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you were in what was it, 14 when you were in the modeling industry? That is
Yeah.
like that's so young. I don't even think I knew who I was or what I wanted to be or really knew much about myself at that age. And you were thrust into the international modeling industry. And I know not personally, right, but from stories that I've heard and things like that, that there's so much like objectification. And I've heard that it can be so dehumanizing for people in that space. I can't imagine what that does to someone in their teenage years.
Well, it messes you up. That's what it does. It messes you up. It should be simple. But it is a very dangerous gamble, I think, for parents to decide to send their 14-year-old kids to just out to the world and and manage. So I don't think that's a good idea to do that. I think that the minimal age should be 18, but in general I'm not a huge fan of modeling world, as maybe you know, and if someone else heard my story before, I'm not a huge fan of modeling. This industry is so shallow and so empty, and and even if watching Met Gala on May 4th, so not
Hmm.
long ago, um it's just infuriating, that people that are making money in this industry are people who are already super rich, and everyone else who really deserves to be applauded is like barely surviving on the minimal wages. So
Mm,
fashion industry is not a good industry for anyone, in my opinion, but especially for young girls, for sure. You've, I mean, people treat you like a commodity,
yeah.
right? And we can see that on examples of even Epstein's files, right? When
Hmm.
bosses of modeling agencies would send messages like, I'm sorry, a pimp to a client, to a potential client saying, "Hey, I send you two. Is it enough?" I mean, that's abuse itself.
And it's really interesting that, in the world that we live in today, that women are still pushed in that realm as well. I also know that, there are guys that experience those things as well. So I'm not taking you guys out, you guys, but the majority is women, right? We are used for our bodies in a lot of these industry stuff. And you're not the first person that I've heard that's, really talked about this. And then there's all the behind the scenes that no one knows about. And I know that that's part of your story, and we can lightly touch on it. I also want to really touch on a lot of the other pieces and components, but I know that it's on your website and stuff like that, that like you were saying, all the things that you were objectified to and stuff like that. Then at the age of 16, you were also a part of another, I guess, scandal, we'll call it, right? That
Mhm.
was happening during that time with Harvey Weinstein. And again, it amazes me and it also shocks me to know that we still live in a time where that is even a thing and that it can happen at such a large proportion without many people knowing it, or with people just turning a blind eye and pretending like they didn't see it.
Hmm. Yes, I know. So, few things. Yes, I was 16 when I was sexually assaulted by Harvey. But how to say it? I was a very innocent teenager. Even though I was in this world, I was shy. I didn't feel like I belonged there. I always felt like an outcaster. So, and I really was innocent because I had a great relationship with men, with my father before. So I never really expected any danger. But also,
Mm,
I was naive. I was naive, as probably many, young girls. And I think that teenagers back then were a little bit more reserved. Maybe that's too much to say that, but that's just from observation. Maybe I'm getting old, but I think that Instagram, which obviously didn't exist when I was 16 years old, Instagram
Hmm.
and social media are changing the scenario of the dynamic between men and women a lot. And
Hmm.
things, I don't think that things can be a secret for as long as they were right now, because it's so much easier to get information and to spread information, right?
Yeah.
Um, but where I'm going with that, I think that also right now it is very important for parents to protect their teenagers, let's say daughters, if we're talking about girls, from presenting themselves in the wrong way in the social media and in the world, if you know what I mean. I'm not a huge fan of over sexualization of women. I think that it's great to be able to express what you want, but you know, not everything, like, not, first of all, not everything has to be exposed. And second of all, it's more important to work on your mental health and on your happiness from inside, and adding
Hmm.
value to yourself from inside, rather than, necessarily posting it to the world. But
Yeah.
that's just my observation. I have friends right now with teenage daughters, and so I'm remembering also myself when I was 14, and honestly, when I see 14 years old, I can't imagine that I was traveling by myself, because that's still a child, basically,
Yeah.
big child, big kid, but a kid.
Well, I mean, your prefrontal cortex hasn't even completely developed, right? Like
Right? Yeah.
the logic is not all there,
It's
right?
not
And
there.
I was so like I agree with you. I was so naive at that age. I mean, even
Right.
when I was 18, I was still completely
Yeah.
like just it was like there was certain things that just didn't exist. Now we also didn't have those kinds of conversations. I feel like social media, a lot of that stuff, like you said, is a little bit more out there and things like that. And there's still so many people that don't know or didn't know or don't
Mhm.
understand or don't find the information. And I think a lot of that is because while, yes, we have accessibility at our fingertips, it's almost at an overwhelming cost.
Yeah.
And so we're still missing the mark of being able to educate and let people know what's going on and talk about signs, things to be aware of, and then how to deal with or heal from challenges and traumas
Mhm.
and things that we go through.
Absolutely. I think with social media, just one last thing, it's important to choose what interests you, right? And
Mhm.
then just follow that, because we can add so many different things and just spread our attention between things that are not even interesting for us, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm very blessed that my boys haven't really like social media doesn't mean a lot to them.
Uh-huh.
Think,
Really? Oh my
but
God, bravo.
yeah, I know, right? They would rather be out hiking or building things and stuff like that, which is amazing. And they have friends and stuff that are enthralled in that. And we talk about it all the time, right? And like how much it takes their attention away or how annoying it is that everything has to be posted or
Yeah.
it's really interesting how we're teaching everyone to live as like an open book, but
Yeah.
also you're opening up your world to be judged by everyone. And we're
Everyone.
not talking about how to, like you said, create the happiness and the boundaries that we need first, so that if we make that decision to be online, we know how to handle the ugly comments. Because I mean,
Yeah.
it just is what it is, right? People are ugly, people are nasty, there are bullies out there,
Yeah.
and they have free range, and we're not teaching in a way to create a safe space
Yeah.
before people are doing that. We're so reactive in that. And I think that's why, depression and suicide in teens are going up and stuff like that is because we're not being proactive. I mean, we're trying to now, but it's like
It
we're
took
a
us a
little
while.
backwards. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're a
Took us
little
a while.
backwards when it
Yeah.
comes to certain things. So now, I know that, one of the things that, or I guess not one of several of the things that you focus on
Mhm.
in your practice is also addiction, codependency. Oh, that's a
Yeah.
big one. And eating disorders, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that I really loved, and I was reading this about you, is you had talked about how, in your personal opinion, you believe that addressing individual concerns shouldn't be in isolation. That in your eyes, these challenges, like addiction, codependency, trauma, right, are interconnected
Interconnected.
roots
Absolutely.
of a single tree. I love this. I love that, and I 100% agree with you. And I also believe that in a lot of these challenges and things that we have experienced as individuals,
Yep.
we tend to isolate ourselves as if no one knows what we're going through. And yet, there are a lot of things in the spaces that we have been where the hurt overlaps, right? We don't have to experience the exact same thing to still have some of the same um, challenges come up or
It's like a
things that we're dealing with.
it's like a scar after burning, you know? Every time
Mm,
when you go to a room where it's hot, right, it's gonna hurt you. So the
yeah.
same is with past trauma. It won't just disappear. It will never
Yeah.
disappear because it's going to be integrally part of us. But we can learn how to feel feelings without wanting to escape them and without
Mm,
fearing them, right? Because uh, PTSD, right? Mental health problems. It's mental. So our body reacts to the environment as it would be physical. So we not only get anxious, but our whole body changes, right?
hmm
And with prolonged PTSD, people can lose hair, people can turn gray, people, there's so many different outcomes that can come from post-traumatic stress syndrome and trauma. So first of all, we have to understand that it's mental, and working on mind and body when it comes to working with PTSD patients and with patients with addiction and codependence is extremely important. For me in my practice was always extremely important. When I was a manager of a clinic, a rehab clinic in Poland, I hired psychiatrists, psychologists, but also music therapists, art therapists, yoga instructor, because if you're not taking care of the outside, you can't your inside will feel it. And of course, if you're only taking care of your outside, your inside can still be completely messed up.
I love that you make this connection though as well because this is something I feel like should be like shouted from the rooftops. And it's something that I didn't know or understand either, right? In my personal opinion, my thought pattern was if I'm not dealing with it and I'm not thinking about it, then
Uh-huh.
it's not there, right? Have you heard that from patients?
Yes, of course, of course. It's like a magic cape, right? We put it on and we're invisible.
Absolutely. Like I feel like we've almost been taught that it's two completely separate components, right?
Hmm.
Not that the mind and the body are connected, but like if the mind's not thinking about
Yeah.
it, if the mind's not focused on it, then like don't worry about it, right? Or push through and you'll be fine.
Oh my God. This is one of the times that I truly push through it. You push through
Oh,
it until you're gonna push yourself off the bridge. Push through it. That you can't push through things like that. You get, but and second of all, yes, I also hear these advices very often. I mean, patients are telling this to me, friends are telling this to me. You know what? If you're really stressed about something, just try to do something physically exhausting. And I'm like, even if I will be doing push-ups, if I'm worried about a freaking pink elephant, the pink elephant is gonna sit on my back while I'm doing the push-ups. You know what I mean? You can't escaping from something is not and not addressing it will never
hmm
solve the problem, and
Yeah.
will never let us understand what the real problem is, because the real problem, like you said before, the roots, right, it lays much deeper than the first, I don't know, sexual assault, let's say, or first, I don't know, hit of a heroin or whatever it is. Like
hmm
something had to build up to the point where, I mean, not with sexual assault, but something had to build up. So we are more vulnerable to people like that. If it's something that, was not an attack in a dark valley, right?
hmm
Um, because often, like victims of, for example, with Harvey and with Epstein and with all these people, sexual assaults, were girls that were just They didn't have the strength inside of them. They didn't have the education. They didn't have the strength. And they probably didn't know their own value that well. I know I didn't. I would, yes.
I think that that's a really important one that and I think we should talk about this one for just a minute is the value that you put on yourself or don't put on yourself. And I mean that from a very young age. So any parents listening, like tune in, keep your ears open, because I feel like in the household that I grew up in, and I had a wonderful household, and it was more focused on like your achievements and the more that you did and the better that you did in school and you know, all that, right? It was like, oh, I'm so proud of you. Like that's it was very much tied to the achievements, which is great to an extent. But in terms of actually valuing myself as an individual, I
Mhm.
really, really struggled with that. You know, so when I was in compromising spaces or people were kind of pushing me to do something that I wasn't necessarily okay with,
Mhm.
for me, I didn't know how to say no or how to put the boundary up, you know, or stand my ground. It's almost like that concept didn't exist. I don't know if you've ever heard anybody kind of talk with you about this,
Yeah.
but
Um, yes, I mean, I grew up in a family. We grew up, I guess we were born more or less at the same time. So back then, again, I think it was a little bit different. But that being said, I grew up in a family where also achievements were very important. There was no really conversation about, there was no real conversation about feelings. You know, my mom was never really a warm mother. She would rather show through doing things or giving things, which
hmm
probably she thought is the best. But that also made me not maybe love myself for sure, not even like myself. I really didn't like myself at all. And I think that because my mom was so strong and I was scared of her very often, this kind of led me to a path of choosing people that I wanted to be surrounded like her, people that were
mm,
overpower me, right?
yeah.
And that I would want to please or show them that I can do it, because that's what I always wanted to show to my mom, right? Push through it,
Yeah.
I can do it. And inside, I would, starve myself to almost to death, or vomit in the bathrooms, because that was the result of everything that happened, right? I was very young when my anorexia and bulimia started. So and all this time I was just trying to push through it, right? Trying to show to the world that I'm the golden girl. And I would fool a lot of people because, sexist and all this stuff, but I could never fool myself. And so the same thing is with, high achievers, or people like you probably describe yourself a little bit at the
Yes.
beginning. Um, it's what the world sees is brings them more value to themselves than they could ever bring.
hmm
And this in a smart therapy should be, switched,
Yeah.
because the outside is a we have to treat it as a white noise sometimes. The
hmm
only real validation can come from inside.
Yeah. So speaking on that, then let's say we've got some audience members that are listening. They're like, oh my gosh, like I grew up the same way and I didn't realize I'm probably doing the same thing to my kid. What would be something that they could utilize or focus on or conversate differently to help have a better outcome so we aren't producing the same results from when we were children?
I mean, it's hard to do it by yourself with yourself, right? But understanding, and like you said, if someone already, you know, opened one of the shelves and be like, hey, this might be something that connects to me, then I would say try to write it out, talk it out, but really be with yourself for a longer period of time so you can really see how to change the relationship with your child.
Mm,
Because we can't just, it's not like a physical exercise when we do, push-ups or sit-ups or whatever. It has to be a process, right? And it's
hmm
not just like I will change the way I say should you do it or can you do it? I mean, yeah, you can change that, but this is not going to change the dynamic. The dynamic has to be seen as a complex of actions and reactions that you have with your children, and compare them to what you have with your parents. Then try to think what you didn't like in the relations with your parents, and then see if you're reproducing it. This is extremely hard. I'm talking about something, this is extremely hard, but that's the only way to do it. I will
Yeah.
tell you that I I know I'm a good mom, right? And how I know I'm a good mom? Because I love my son to more than anything. And because I learned very early on how I don't want to be like. And I know that because I'm my parents' daughter, I was born with the same, genetics and with a similar temper, right? I learned a lot of reactions from them, but then I knew how to unlearn it and how to really trust myself and become myself. And I think that when we're talking about motherhood, I think that the best mothers are those ones who just really are true to themselves.
Mm.
Because if you're true to yourself, then you're giving the same to your child.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they're going to mirror, right, and do exactly what it is that they're
Yeah.
seeing and how you're being. But I connect with this so much because I know that for the longest time, the way that I raised my kids was very similar to how my family raised me, right? There were some things where I was like, I will never do that. We all do that, right? But it wasn't until I got out of my abusive relationship and my oldest one became a teenager that I really started looking at like him and I had always had a great relationship, both of my kids and I did. And we were coming like very distant, very oppositional of each other, always angry. Like now I would call it a trigger, right? Before then
Mhm.
I wouldn't have known. But I just knew that something was off, which I found really interesting. And that was probably one of the very first times that I really sat down with myself and was like, okay, maybe it's not all him. Like maybe there's also something going on with me, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't realize it at that time that if you work on yourself, then the way that you talk to yourself, the way you start seeing yourself transitions into the way that you see your children, talk to your children, like all these things. It was really interesting. It's not what I expected. And
Mhm.
it's probably one of the most beautiful transformations that I've seen over the last 6, 7 years with my kids. And I always come back to it is so important for us to work on ourselves first as
Mhm.
we are trying to work through because being a parent is hard regardless, right? It is what it is, right? They're all over the place. You're chasing them down. There's drama going on. There's all the things. I'm not saying that this made parenting like a piece of cake, but what it did was it created this really interesting dynamic, which was
Mhm.
my kids saw me shift and then
Yeah.
I saw it shift in them, right? The way that we
Oh,
conversated
absolutely.
was different. If I didn't raise my voice and kept it low, I started noticing that they would do that. If I stepped in and said, hey, I need a break before I blow up on you, my kids started doing that back. That was one of the neatest things because I was like, I never told them that. But I
Yeah.
remember having a disagreement with my oldest one in our kitchen one time, and he was like, Mom, I need a break before I explode on you. And at first I was like, shh, how dare you? And then I was like, wait a minute,
No, that's
pull you back.
good. That's
Right?
good.
like,
That's
I'm like,
good.
he is realizing that
Yeah.
he needs that space, which is what I tried to create as well. But there's this really interesting dynamic where I think especially as parents, and I know there's a lot that are going to disagree with this, but for us that are maybe a little bit older, we were raised to respect absolutely everyone that was above
Mhm.
us,
Mhm.
point blank,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
They were the authority and you were the
Yeah.
child.
They're the
And
boss. You're the.
yeah, and that sometimes that comes with a power dynamic that I think we
Yeah.
don't even realize. And that is what shut my kids down. That is what caused a lot of the disconnect and the headbutting. When I started to open up and started to conversate more, we were still able to have a level of like, hey, we can talk about this here, but like if we're in public, there's a level of respect. Like there were
Mhm.
boundaries and ways to create that in our relationship, especially as they became teenagers,
Yeah.
that I didn't have growing up. Because I
Yeah.
mean, up until probably my
Different.
20s, right? It was
Yeah.
still like, I am your parent and you are still the child. I'm like, I'm an adult though. Like, what?
What's going on? Yeah.
Right? But like you said though, when you were talking about it earlier about how, you put yourself around people
Hmm.
that were similar to your mom, I didn't even realize that I kind of really did the same thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't even notice that that's what I was doing, but I was
You
looking
can
for those
notice.
people to give me that direction or to kind of tell me what to do, and I was looking for them to validate how I felt.
Yeah.
And I craved that so much for so many
It was like
years.
a high. It was right, like a hit.
Yeah.
It's like it gave you high like a hit. Because yeah, this is when our nervous system calms down and is like, I got it. I got what I needed. I got what I was craving for. But going back to being a like to motherhood, a very good friend of mine, she was growing up in a house where, I mean, her mother was an alcoholic, right? And active alcoholic. And it messed up their relationship. But then her mother got sober, clean, and 10 years later, or whatever it is, 8 years later, she's talking about her mom as her hero. So when parents change, the relationship can always change as long as we,
Mhm.
adjust the things that are, um, well, let's say maybe possible to change in ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Our,
definitely.
our, and uh, yeah, so for me, I grew up in a very authoritarian house, let's say by my mom. So I didn't. I'm not a huge lover of rules with my son, let's say. I like him to be free because you know what I believe, and let's see if I'm wrong in 10 years, but I believe that if I will show him how to act and tell him how I feel, I can see
Hmm.
already he's 7 years old, but he's understanding it. Like when he sees certain things, he doesn't. When he was younger, he would cry or he would just like, "Yeah, I don't care," right? But right now, he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry," or he knows how to apologize. He knows how to do certain things. Of course, it's a work in progress. But I think what's different when you were talking when you were telling saying about your story is that I escaped the relationship, the abusive relationship when my son was 2. So he basically
Mm.
doesn't even remember it. Even though he was saying he remembers some things, I don't think he really remembers it that much. So and that's exactly why I did it, because I wanted him to grow up and to be raised as someone who's kind and who's nice and who doesn't see domestic violence. Because
Yeah.
even passive domestic violence is abusing to a child.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very important. I think people don't speak about this enough.
Hmm.
Because often it's being said, oh yeah, okay, I hit the mother, I didn't hit the child, I never hit the child. It doesn't matter. If you're yelling at the mother in front of the child, he will absorb that, or she.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw that with my kids definitely coming out of that relationship, and just the personality traits that they absorbed because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while to really kind of like work through some of those pieces and components and things like that. So absolutely, I 100% agree with that, because that's something that I dealt with in the court systems. That when they ask me, well, why can't he see his child? I'm like, hello.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe the pending criminal charges. But it's really
Oh my
interesting how
god. Same
they
situation.
it's so interesting how they just completely separate it,
Separated.
and
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, like, oh, well, that's their biological child. They would never. And it's like, personality traits is a personality trait. What somebody does in one place is what they're going to do in another place, right? Like, anyway,
Absolutely.
that's a
Like,
whole nother.
yeah, but just like to make a comparison between America and Poland. In
Yeah.
Poland, I called police one time, right? And because it wasn't actively happening, they couldn't do anything. And I'm like,
Interesting.
are you freaking serious? So a woman has to be calling why she's being beaten up, and the police has to come
Wow.
and see it? Like, what are we in? I don't want to say the name of the country, but in like third world countries, you know.
That
I
is
don't know why I didn't want to
insane.
say that, but yeah. But
I get it. I totally get it. So now I have an interesting question because my brain is going all over the place. So let's say there are some connections in this parent and child dynamic, right?
yeah.
Similar to some of the things that you and I experience. Do you feel like that also creates or can create a layer of codependency, and then that ends up showing up in later relationships? Because I feel like, especially for me, I wouldn't have associated it with that, but I know that like being in that relationship, I realized that's one of the reasons why I stayed for so long was because of that codependency piece, which by the way, it's codependency. If you don't know what it means, look it up. It's not what you think it is. Cause I was like, I'm a super independent person. But it's, it's, it's a really interesting term, but I feel like there were some pieces connected that can carry forward.
But do you mean in a way that your parents were like that? Or,
Yeah, like the way that my parents raised me,
huh?
I think that there was a level of almost like
Codependency.
codependency
Yeah.
there, and then that kind of transferred over
Oh,
into the
absolutely.
relationships.
Absolutely. My father, I was very close to my father, and like I felt safe with him. And my father was completely codependent from my mother.
Interesting.
Even though he was the breadwinner, let's say,
Hmm.
but still she was the one that was, holding everyone on leash. And she, I don't want to say too much to her, but she was the one that had other problems. So yeah, so definitely there was codependency. And for sure, like when you are a kid, right? You choose, you don't, I don't think it's possible to love two parents. I don't think kids love two parents the same way, right? They love
Mm,
differently. So
yeah.
you tend to be closer to one parent than the other. And then depending probably on which parent you're closer to, then the same scenario you will try or start to reproduce in your own relationships, right?
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Hmm.
Because
Okay.
we observe the behaviors, we observe the reactions, we feel similar, right, to the parent that we're
Hmm.
closer to. So it's yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we move on to, for anyone that maybe is not familiar with the word codependency, how would you describe it? What would be your definition of codependency?
Codependency, it's a well, we can say inherited, but a tendency to have toxic and dependent relationship with a person that is close to us, with a person that is our partner, right? And codependency, well, I have a codependent personality, can is because it's a personality trait. It's very difficult to work on, but it is possible. And usually, in a relationship, that was the start of the word codependency. Was that was one person was an addict, or one person had a very irrational behavior, and another
Hmm.
person was kind of like tied up with a rope to
Oh,
everyone.
okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of
Invisible rope.
sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I actually I read a book years ago when I was kind of discovering all the things, and it was called Codependency No More.
Uh-huh.
And that's a lot of what it talks about is some form of like addiction, alcoholism, like in those realms. And what was interesting was the examples that they gave and following up with like the thought patterns from those I was
Yeah.
able to relate to. And I was like, holy crap. Like that makes so much sense now as to why I allowed certain things to happen or why I stayed in my abusive relationship as long as I did. And why the next relationship, there were some similarities. He was never abusive. He was a little egotistical. But it was very interesting. And I realized like I was trapping myself,
Yeah.
almost, I mean, people say like, oh, I can fix them. I feel like part of that is some of the realm that I played in with that. But it wasn't necessarily that I could fix him. It was more of what can I do better to prove myself so that they will love me
Mhm.
the way that I want them to.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's basically taking the guilt, the fault, and the responsibility on yourself rather than the other person. Um, it's almost like you want to paint them white in your own head. You want to paint them as ideal, right? In your own head.
Hmm.
But that's just a way of punishing yourself for everything that you don't love or you don't value in yourself. And one of the most difficult questions that one of the questions that is most difficult for people that come to therapy and they hear that they're probably codependent and they don't want to leave or can't leave or want to leave. For example, when I had a patient that really wanted to leave her husband, but she was so scared to do that. And she said that she was so scared to do that. And so they stayed in a relationship for 10 years, right? And for 10 years,
Mm,
she's saying that maybe five of them were good, but five of them were terrible. And then, I asked, okay, so what was your role in it? What was your part? And it really touched her because it felt like, what do you mean, what was my part? My husband was abusive. And I'm like, yes, but even if that's so, you have to understand what was your part because you had a part in that. For me, it took me personally a long time to understand or to digest what part I was playing in my marriage, in my relationship. But if we really want to heal, we have to be brutally honest with ourselves. Codependency, it's not a weakness, or it doesn't have to be a weakness, right? It is just something that can be worked on and that had to really force us to like going deeper inside of ourselves
hmm.
because it can't be um letting go of a codependent relationship cannot be taught on simple exercises and just advices.
Absolutely. Oh, 100%. Um, yeah. Yeah, and that was a hard pill for me to swallow as well, was realizing how brutally honest I needed to be with myself and in taking certain ownerships, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that what somebody did to you is right or it's okay or anything like that. And you have to look at, I don't know, what boundaries was I not setting up? What things did I let go on? When should I have said no when instead I did this because it was a safer option?
Or what was your motive? Because if we're really, really
Mm,
honest with ourselves, sometimes, you know, pleasure is pain. Let's say it like that as a metaphor. And sometimes we really craved for certain things, right? The
hmm.
tension, the stress, or something that seems as a very unpleasant thing, but it was something that we were missing, maybe because of the childhood, maybe because our environment, many different reasons. But only if we really understand our motivation, why we did that, why we stayed. What is the real motive? Are you scared? What are you exactly scared of? What are the solutions? Just to see the full spectrum
Yeah.
is to understand what was driving us and how can we change the direction if we don't want to end up on the same road.
Mm, I've never thought about it that way. What is the motivation? Ooh, like I'm gonna go ponder on this one now because I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever thought about that, in regards to my relationship. Like, what was the motivation? Oh, I know what I can tell you. If we're putting it out there. Um, I know that part of my motivation was that I had my oldest one when I was 16 with a different, we're gonna call him a dude. He doesn't get to be called a gentleman.
Okay.
And so when I got with my other one at the age of 18, which was the
Yeah.
abusive relationship,
Yeah.
and I had my second son, part of me staying, I know, was because I'm a Catholic and you are not supposed to separate, right? So that was a
Mhm.
huge overarching theme. And I'd already screwed up by getting pregnant young. And so I was constantly trying to make up for what I considered my mistake
Yeah.
years prior to. So I would definitely say that was one of my motivations was I needed to show that I could be a good Catholic and be in a steady relationship, and stay with the person that I had a kid with the second
Okay.
time around. So
And so how long did you stay in the marriage, in the second relationship? Sorry, the second
10
relationship.
years,
10 years. And when did it start to get bad?
probably about 3.5 years in.
3.5 years in. So what made you stay after it started to get bad? Like, do you remember the moment when you first time thought, oh my God, I'm scared?
It was, there were multiple times that I can tell you where I remember thinking, like, could I leave? Is it a possibility? And one of the things was, I have nowhere to go. What would I do with my kids? Would the police come and take my children because I'm a bad mother? It never had anything to do with him. It was
Yeah.
always me. I
Hmm.
can't move in with my family. They're still taking care of my younger sister, so they don't have space for me. So a lot of it came back to
So fear,
me. Hmm.
fear. So your motivation was fear,
Yeah.
right? To stay, even though you knew you're paying a high cost, right?
Yeah.
And it's not always that. Like my motivation was to try to change him
Mm,
because I never got to change my mom. I never got to, we never really found a common language. So I thought that, and I'm not ashamed to say it right now, although probably listeners will think what they think. My motivation in a way was ego because I thought I can do that, right?
oh,
If I'm
yeah.
going to try hard enough. So I don't want to sugarcoat myself. And I don't like to be called a victim, even though I was a victim of that. I'm not a
Hmm.
victim anymore because I can face, whatever there, whatever was my little game that I was playing in my head that led me to stay in this relationship for so long.
Yeah.
Um, but trying to understand that can really help to I mean, I'm not sure if it can help to leave the relationship because if we're still in it, it means that we still think the same ways, right? But at least once you end the toxic relationship, to not enter to another one that is as bad as that
Absolutely.
previous one. So just
Yeah.
understand what you really wanted from it or what was holding you back.
Hmm. Oh, such a good point. Oh, Kaya, thank you so much for being so
Thank
open with
you.
that as well and asking the question because I feel like somebody is going to hear that and that's going to make a connection. And I think that we need to share our personal stories, right? That's where people heal
Yeah.
from. That's where people decide to think differently. That can be the first beginning step because somebody realized that they were not alone. So thank you so much for being
Oh,
open about that. I appreciate that.
oh, that's the only way I can. Unfortunately. Brutally honest. But yeah, you're right. Storytelling is and sharing our stories is something that is extremely important. And I feel that if I've been what I've been through and I wouldn't help or try to help others, then I would feel like a really shitty person.
I
I
agree
mean,
with you.
we're
I
not,
I
you know, we're not individuals on this earth. We're all connected. We are a collective. So let's just help each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is such such an amazing note to kind of end on as well is that we are not alone. It doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter what you've experienced. There is someone somewhere that knows how you feel, that has had either the same or a similar experience. I think that, and I know this is true for me and a lot of other survivors that I have spoken with, is
Mhm.
we felt like it was only us, that nobody would understand, that nobody would be able to relate, that we would be shamed for the things that we went through, or we already had a feeling of guilt that we allowed it to happen.
Yeah,
And so we isolate ourselves, and it's very hard to grow and become different and be able to change patterns and things that we've been through when you see yourself as isolated, right? Versus finding
absolutely.
that community.
Absolutely. Community and connections are a medicine of their own. That's why we have so many support groups. And I think it's worth mentioning that there are support groups for women that are abused. And,
Absolutely.
if someone is listening and is struggling, find a therapist, find a group, right?
Yeah.
That's an important step.
1000%. So, as we're coming to a close, then where can everybody find you? How can they connect with you? How can they be in your world?
Absolutely. So you can find me on KAJA dash SOKOLA.com or on Instagram at Kaja Sokola.
Awesome. And I know
So
that
please, if
do
you
you
have
have
questions.
resources on
Mhm.
your website?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do have links. Yes, links.
Okay, wonderful. And do you have because I know that I don't know if it's resources. Sorry, everybody. I lost my thought. I was so enthralled in Kaya and all her things. I just but because I know that people are able to work with you, so they can also
Yeah.
inquire on your website, correct? Okay,
Yes.
wonderful.
There's a
All
form.
right.
Yeah. That you can.
Okay, awesome. And then there's tons of media coverage and things like that. I know you're very open about the things that you've been through, and I love that you share your story so
Mhm.
publicly as well. I can't thank you enough for that. And then I also know that oh, you have a publication section that is
Yes,
on
I
your
do.
website. So okay, so what
I've had
exactly is that?
These are all my academic writings. So there's about
Okay.
20 scholar articles, and I co-wrote 2 books. So you can find it online,
Wonderful.
and to some of them there are links. So as well,
Okay.
if you're interested.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yay. Oh, that's so wonderful. Okay, so for anyone that wants to dive in deep into all the things Kaya, be sure to get to her website. Of course, we'll make sure we have all that information in the show notes. We'll make it super easy for you to find and follow her. Kaya, thank you so much
Thank you.
for the conversation today. And just again, all the pieces for being so open about the things that you've been through and wanting to make a difference in the world. We need more people like that.
Thank you
Is
so
there
much.
anything you would like to leave the audience with?
Um, Look in the mirror and try to be honest with yourself, with everything that you're most scared of, all your deepest secrets. Try to say to yourself, let it be like a little homework for you guys from me that I'm sure will make you feel better. And once you're really honest with everything and you said your deepest secret, tell yourself that you love yourself and tell yourself that you're good and special and beautiful. All right? If you can do it,
Oh,
make it.
I love it. Yes, yeah. I've had to learn to look in the mirror and be nice to myself. And it's actually really interesting how much we avoid looking at ourselves in the mirror, like really looking eye to eye when there are things that we haven't dealt with or let go of.
Yeah, yeah, because you know what? If we share the most horrible parts of our lives, then the ones that we are ashamed of, we would have a tendency normally to hate ourselves, right? It's like, oh my God, how I could do that. But remember, your past actions are not you. So let this go and let this other person from your past be free. Okay? You're not the hostage anymore.
Oh, I love that.
That's
That is
part.
wonderful, Kaya. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you to everybody else that's out there. I know that you got some takeaways, and I really hope that this episode got you thinking. Maybe there are some things that you need to work through. Maybe there are some things you've been avoiding working through, and you should probably work on. I would love for you to take Kaya's challenge, look at yourself in the mirror, and then, once you go through those pieces and components, share with yourself how much you do love and do care about yourself, and speak to yourself the way that you would want someone to speak to you, especially as if you were a child, right? You'll hear a
Exactly.
lot of people talk about healing your inner child. And I will tell you, I didn't believe it at first, but I 100% wholeheartedly believe that the way that we talk about ourselves really is healing that small inner child of us that might have been missing some things
Yeah.
from whatever stage it is. So, Please find Kaja on her website. Be sure to follow
Thank
all
you.
of her stuff. And Kaja, again, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. Yes. And until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable